In a world where information seems to travel at the speed of light and traffic at a snail's pace, where the agenda of those at the helm doesn't always reflect the pressures on the streets where the rubber hits the road, where there's queue of issues needing to be interrogated in the name of speaking truth to power.
Welcome to a place at the table,
where we set the agenda,
table the issues that matter to you,
and invite you to take a seat at the table.
Welcome to a place at the table. The world is a global village, and what starts as a ripple on one side of the globe makes wave on the other side. So pay close attention. I'll be speaking on the silent rumble, a world without DEI.
Inka, keeping your foot firmly on the neck of America, I say. Anyway, did you know that victims of cyberbullying are 1.9 times more likely to commit suicide? Welcome to the table, Cheta.
Thank you, Zuma. Now we know that about cyberbullying, we wait to learn more. From an endangered group, however, to a more endangered system, it's time for us to confront the deepening rule of law crisis in Nigeria, our country.
Sounds urgent, Cheta. We keep pushing and eventually we'll have something to celebrate. I'll be spotlighting the menstrual health reform from Bauchi.
Congratulations, Funke. I wish I had something to celebrate when it comes to our blind African leaders. But as you say, Funke, we keep pushing.
What affects me affects you, which is why we need to be at the table to engage with the issues that matter to all of us. It began like a small vibration, a silent rumble that surged into a roar, a monstrous growl from the earth's core. The walls groan, bookshelves topple, glass shatters, light fixtures swing widely. A high-pitched scream rang out in the hall. It's a dance of chaos, a macabre ballet of destruction. No, I'm not talking about an earthquake. I'm talking about the impact of the US backlash against diversity, equity, and inclusion. It didn't only affect multinational agencies like the USAID. It also affected companies like Google, which rescinded its goal to increase representation of underrepresented groups in leadership by 30%, and Meta, which dismantled its DEI program. Amazon went beyond halting certain DEI programs to removing references to DEI from its annual reports. Many professionals in the public and private sectors are today losing their jobs because of this DEI demonization. DEI has now become the new buzzword for incompetence and rejection of all that is not white and male. Certainly, the shift in the political landscape in the US is significantly impacting the ability of the UN to meet its mandate of promoting peace, security, human rights, and sustainable development worldwide. Many UN programs aimed at poverty eradication are closely tied to DEI principles, as they often focus on marginalized and vulnerable populations. With priorities given to other issues over DEI, the UN may need to reallocate resources, potentially slowing down efforts to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly those related to poverty, inequality, and social justice. What about the future of human rights? The UN human rights work often involves advocating for the rights of marginalized groups, which is closely aligned with DEI principles. A backlash against DEI could embolden governments and entities across the world that oppose these principles to crack down on human rights. This begs the question, what is the UN without DEI? And what is the world without DEI? Imagine a world without DEI. It will probably be a place with identical buildings lacking any architectural variations or cultural flair, where the people are colorless figures, devoid of individuality and personality. No one deserves to live in that world.
The world as we know it has changed. And when you ask the question, what will a world without DEI be like? It will be a jungle. Survival of the loudest, not necessarily the fittest. A lot of people confuse DEI with sacrificing meritocracy for equity. But what DEI is actually about is inclusivity.
Sure.
And that is one of the core mandates of the UN. But the US, being the single largest donor, they hold a lot of leverage over the UN policies and the interventions they allocate resources to. Again, the world as we know it is changing. And that does give room for other world powers to take charge and take up the responsibility that the US is ready to pass on to somebody else.
From my point of view, I'd like to look at it from the position of how would the effect it would have in a country like Nigeria. And there are two things that I would bring forward. The first one is the effect on our system here because of America's weight. We cannot deny that America has a huge weight globally when it comes to media soft power. Now, if the Americans begin to pass the messaging that, oh, there are certain groups of people who are protected, because however way you look at it, a lot of the noise about DEI is code word for racism. And in many respects, if, for example, I'm boarding a plane from New Orleans to New York, and I see a black pilot, I know deep down that this guy has sweated blood to be there. He is very qualified. But the noise about DEI claims that he's not. So when you think of a country that has social divisions such as Nigeria, and is very heterogeneous, and we have our own problems with ethnicity, religion, all of these sectarian problems really, the message being passed that, oh, DEI is bad, we want to scatter DEI, it will reflect here ultimately.
Our
And
quota system.
we will begin to have our quota system. For the record, we have mismanaged it. But the American DEI system was actually quite well managed. So the people who have managed it well are scattering their system. Those of us that have mismanaged our system, we are going to take the bad lessons from it. Yeah, go on, please.
I would like to say I don't even think Nigeria is an inclusive country.
No, it's not. Nigeria is not.
Particularly on the gender spectrum. There is
every spectrum. But I mean, we are currently going through Senator Natasha's issue. So
beyond the Natasha issue, when we look at governance, when we look at corporate, when we look at politics, there's still very little women representation.
I think I just want to highlight, there's a line towards the end of your advocacy where you said, it will probably, when you're painting a picture, you said it will probably be a place with identical buildings lacking any architectural variation or cultural flair. And I want to say, that's a bit of an underrepresentation of what it is. So think about it as that, but you having such building and there are certain people that have access to those buildings. It's not just that there is no color or flair. Even at the fact that it's colorless or tasteless, there are loads of people that would not have access to get into that building for whatever reason it is. But you talked about the organizations that are pulling back, and I think that is really disappointing. I would, however, say that they should find ways to still maintain their commitment, but ensure that it is in line with business goals and business performance instead of pulling back. Because if you're pulling back, are you pulling back completely because you were never in support of giving people opportunity? Was it a hypocritical move? As much as business needs to be done, I think that there's a place for conscience, right? And also understanding that what we are doing makes sense and it impacts the world. These are companies that will come out and give you figures of how their products is impacting the world. And again, they say that's PR and storytelling, right? But I feel like there should be a level of truth in your PR. So with all the stories that you have given out in the past in terms of numbers, of impact and all, and one day you wake up to say, oh, this is no longer, so how can we now take a step back and begin to question those figures and impact stories that have been given? So I'm not saying give people that do not deserve an opportunity, right? Everyone deserves an opportunity as long as they can fill the shoes that needs to be filled.
For me, this reversal is a big blow to the progress and growth the world has made in terms of inclusivity, diversity, and equity. And for the benefit of somebody there wondering, well, what's this DEI? Some people say DEI. Diversity is embracing the differences everyone brings to the table. Equity is treating everyone fairly and providing equal opportunities. Inclusion is respecting everyone's voice and creating a culture in which people from all backgrounds feel encouraged to express the ideas that they have. Having said that, let's look at how developing countries like Nigeria and the rest of Africa, South America and the rest of those places will begin to fare. We're talking about marginalized people. We're talking about underrepresented people. And just as you've said, somebody said here that it's like endorsing racism all over again. It's not just racism. It's also about saying, look, it doesn't matter whether there's a woman on the board or at the table. It doesn't matter whether we give the youth a chance. What it means is that the gains we've made so far concerning the SDGs, for instance, is reversed. And so we are going back decades of what we have achieved. We're rolling back to say, no, we don't need it anymore. We don't need the women. We don't need the children. Oh, we cannot be poor. And that's what it means. And it's so sad that even the UN is looking powerless right now. It looks like, just as you've said, Cheta, the weight of America compared to the rest of the world is being seen. Everyone wants to be right, wants to align with the US, even when the US is doing the wrong thing. Zuma, this is not about pressing the neck of the US. This is about saying Trump is wrong. We need diversity, we need inclusion, we need equity.
Life is meant to be colorful, diverse, and multicultural, or else it's bland, uniform, and ultimately lifeless.
Yinka, you wax poetic on that one. I'm also advocating for the preservation of a dynamic group that are victims of the times we are in, the digital generation. Did you know that 3 out of every 10 children online have experienced cyberbullying? Did you know that 1 out of 5 bullied children skip school due to cyberbullying? Did you know that 7 out of 10 victims of cyberbullying may experience mental health issues? Did you know that victims of cyberbullying are 1.9 times more likely to commit suicide? Last weekend, I spoke at the Aspilos Foundation's event on gender-based online violence. And later this week, I watched a Netflix movie about a 13-year-old murderer whose actions were triggered by cyberbullying. This brought home the severe and far-reaching consequences of cyberbullying globally. Emotionally, victims suffer from anxiety, depression, and isolation, and most find it difficult to step away from it due to constant digital access. This is an issue that transcends borders, gender, and race. It is harassment, it is intimidation, it is humiliation through digital platforms, and its management requires efforts at personal, community, and international levels. But what can you do as a cyberbullied victim? You have to document your evidence, save records of abuse in case you decide to pursue legal action. Many countries have cyberbullying laws, and you don't have to just enjoy it, you can do something. You should report and block offenders. It is your account, and you have the right to a safe space. You should also seek emotional and mental health support. Talk to friends and professionals. They can provide new perspectives and help build emotional resilience. You can also limit your exposure, adjust your privacy settings, mute accounts, go private, and take digital breaks. Remember, social media is not real life. As a community, what can we do? We need to educate and advocate for digital empathy. Just because you can see the person behind the keyboard doesn't mean you should be unkind to them. We need to call out bullies. Just because it isn't happening to you doesn't mean you should remain silent. Stand up against bullies and advocate for victims. We need to model cyber respect. The way the world is, it is sum of all of our actions. If we all practice empathy and respect, the digital space will become a safer environment for everyone. We deserve a world where compassion, not cruelty, reigns supreme.
You said social media is not real life. And I think that for the purpose of conversations like this, we need to maybe do away with that line sometimes, because the level of effect that social media has on our day-to-day activities now, it's a lot. Now, when you try to even separate that, you almost realize that it's impossible, right? So it's becoming part of our day-to-day activities and is a huge part of our real life, right? That's one. Secondly, I think that this is something that has to be dealt with from the top to bottom, from government to teachers to parents and all that, right? And I like that you had that engagement that you mentioned, which is also why I'm very particular about having conversations around social media for good and how people engage. Because sometimes I see comments online and I'm wondering, are these people not from homes? Why do you think it makes sense for you to drop this type of comments on somebody's page or about somebody's body just because you think you're hiding behind your keyboard or your phone, right? So let's call ourselves out. Why would you say something like, do you understand the effect it can have on a person's mental health? That comment you're dropping and you think it's just a comment, I'm having fun. You can take a life, and that makes you a murderer, right? So we need to begin to bring this sort of conversations to the fore, understand that social media is a strong part of our life. It's not going anywhere, except we are saying we want to go back to where we are coming from. But for where we are going and where the world is going, social media is here to stay. It's part of our life. So we need to understand how to relate properly and respect people, just the way you respect people. What you will say to me when you see me, or what you cannot say, imbibe that on social media. And I hope that we'll be able to see progress at some point.
So I want to start from the viewpoint of trying to protect kids, because kids don't yet have all the social skills. There are things people say to me and I just, okay, it's just some faceless person. It's like water off a duck's back. But my kids will be seriously impacted by that. So the parental side of it is very important. However, regulatory, and this is where I will admit, I'll raise my hand and admit that we're entering dangerous territory, because governments could use the regulatory bit to actually stifle freedom of speech. We've seen it in various places. But there has to be a balance somewhere. Social media has to be properly regulated. I'm being very careful because we don't want government to overreach. But at the same time, it cannot continue to be the Wild West. It just can't. So it's about finding a balance, finding the way to make sure that, again, I will lean on Elsie's language. It is traceable. The more people know that there is the potential for them to be traced and there will be repercussions, you will see things like cyberbullying begin to slowly ebb. So it's about sensible regulation. I think that's the expression I've been looking for, sensible regulation.
In Nigeria today, we have a cyber crime law.
Yeah.
I believe it was signed in 2015.
Yes.
It was amended sometime later. And and that law has provisions against cyber stalking and some of all these things that we see. So like you said, off the air, that there are regulations. The problem is that we don't enforce them. And I want to take it a bit further. It's not a matter of that we don't enforce them. We actually abuse the law. Because today, when you see the cases where they're actually charging people on cyber crimes, they're using it as a way to persecute or prosecute the people. The solution really has to be that we have to have technological processes that allow for people to be able to put their evidence somewhere, because sometimes they might not want to talk about it until many years later, especially those who experience sexual assault. And that's why I'm keeping an eye on a particular PhD program that Bauchi State is doing in Canada that is titled Keep It. So she's developing this program.
Digital archive?
Yes, it's a digital archive where women that have gone through sexual assault can just, go through this app or whatever it is, just dump whatever it is, and it will help them catalog it in a way that could be judicially usable in the next 10, 20 years if they decide to come out. We have to use the digital tools we have to be able to ensure that our children are safe on the cyberspace.
Well, for me, I'm returning to your statistics that victims of cyberbullying are 1.9 times more to commit suicide.
That's almost 200%.
Yeah. So but I want to differ a bit and look at celebrities and cyberbullying, and they not being allowed to be human. And you look at what happened to Two-Face, look at what's happening to Ashake. There's a lot of unkindness online nowadays, and everybody has an opinion about your life. You're not, and I'm speaking about celebrities now, they're not allowed to be human at all. And these unkindness can be really, really extreme. I feel for them sometimes, like how do they even cope? You talk about what you can do as a cyberbullying victim, documenting evidence, report blogs, seek, limit your exposure. How many people can you report as a celebrity? How many people? And I don't know how we can stop this, but the digital space can be safe for everyone, at least not in the next few years. I think what we can do is to make it safe for ourselves and to be accountable and make the people in our own circle accountable, because we follow them, they follow us.
Absolutely.
And call them out when they're unkind to other people. That's the only way.
The difference between a victim and a survivor can be information and knowledge.
100% Zuma. It can make all the difference. However, we must move on from information and knowledge to decisive action if we are to weather the deepening rule of law crisis. Nigeria's rule of law crisis is deepening. This is evidenced by increasing reliance on alternative justice systems. Some years ago, I saw a trial in Cross River State, where a woman who was initially skeptical eventually accepted the militant court's verdict. This highlights the erosion of trust in formal institutions. This trend is being replicated across Nigeria, with state failures have created a vacuum that are being filled by non-state actors. In the Northeast, Boko Haram provides rudimentary governance, attracting even those that the government has resettled as a result of their provision of basic amenities. In the Southeast and South-South, militant groups adjudicate disputes, filling in the state's absence. That woman's choice to approach the militant court over the customary court is a stark example. This crisis is not confined to rural areas. In urban centers, police extortion is commonplace and people have lost trust for the police. Judicial corruption, as we saw in the 2024 bribery scandal, further undermines confidence. In the Northwest, banditry has forced communities to form vigilante groups, which, while offering protection, operate outside legal frameworks, exacerbating violence. In Abuja, our country's capital, Berekete Radio and ordinary presidents are a solid example of this problem. People have basically turned to non-state actors for justice. Addressing this issue requires urgent reforms. Firstly, we need to rebuild trust in institutions through accountability, and this is crucial. We must have independent oversight, bodies that must investigate corruption. Secondly, strengthen the judiciary through increased funding, digitization, and merit-based appointments is essential. The National Judicial Council must actively discipline corrupt judges. Thirdly, addressing the root causes of insecurity and governance failures is paramount. Investing in education, healthcare, and infrastructure, particularly in marginalized regions, will reclaim state legitimacy. Finally, civil society groups and the media must find the courage to hold government accountable routinely and keep advocating for reforms and advocacy to raise the public awareness of citizens' rights. I will keep going on back to that Cross River trial because it really touched me. That trial and the conditions in Boko Haram resettlement camps, which was talked about by the UK Guardian back in 2017, underscore the gravity of the situation. Nigeria's rule of law crisis is severe, but with political will, targeted reforms, forcing the government to do the right thing at the right time, unlike what we are seeing in Rivers right now, civil society pressure, rebuilding institutions, and restoring the rule of law is achievable.
The quotes from your advocacy that I like to reiterate is, Nigeria's rule of law crisis is severe. It is indeed. You talk about strengthening the judiciary. In my mind, I ask myself, how to discipline corrupt judges? A song came to my mind.
How do they even determine corrupt judges?
How many of them do you want to discipline? How do you weed them out? But then why would I prefer a militant's court to a customary court?
I would say speed.
Swiftness of justice.
Swiftness of justice.
Swiftness of
Justice
justice.
delayed is justice denied. So maybe I should tell that story, and very quickly. We went for a project in Cross River State. We were staying in a hotel in Calabar. We finished the project in good time, so we had 2 days to spare, and we couldn't find another flight to come back to Lagos. So our fixer said, "Bros," he told me and one of my colleagues, "Bros, may I just carry you go this place? May you see something?" And he took us to a forest. At first, we were afraid that he wanted to kidnap us. But we eventually got there. It was a clearing, and there was this trial. And this woman was dragged in. But basically, she didn't want to come. But in 30 minutes, eventually when she was there, she had no choice. So it was a very simple panel of 3 judges. You talk your own, you talk your own. Waiting to talk natural, waiting to talk natural. Each person had 2 opportunities to speak. And then they put their heads together. In 30 minutes, they ruled in favor of the woman who didn't want to come in the first place. I saw her change. Swiftness. I have court cases where I've sued people that have been in court
for forever.
2016. This is 2025. As in, I've given up on it. So swiftness.
I like the tone of this advocacy. It's about Nigeria's alternative justice system. And what captivated me most was the phrase state's failure, because that's what we're seeing. We see what has happened in Rivers State now. There's a state of emergency there. In all of the permutations and analyses and all of that, what stood out for me and where I thought the justice system failed is in calling, I don't know what, former governor Fubara now, I don't know what to call him now.
Suspended governor.
Suspended, thank you, LC. I don't understand Nigeria. Like Aisha said the other day, if they explain Nigeria to you and you understand, it means they did not explain it very well to you.
There are laws for certain people and different laws for others. And we see the elite class using the judiciary as a way to be able to get certain things that they know that ordinarily they won't be able to do. And it's been long. You know, we can go back to the Supreme Court judgment that brought in Shagari in 1979. You know, the famous
18 to 30.
Yeah. So you can almost see that. I mean, and we can almost line up so many Supreme Court judgments that actually, in reality, don't line up with any judicial. Well, the only judicial precedent it lines up with is the fact that they've always gone in favor of let not there be a vacuum and all that. Then they interpret the laws sometimes in a way that is difficult to understand. And it permeates down to what you see where everybody realizes the fact that in this country, it's a law for the rich and it's a law for those who can't afford it. And so, and that's where you see this, issue that you find in Cross River and also in the Northeast, where people gravitate towards where they can get swift justice. They might not necessarily agree with the process, and the process might not necessarily be fair because is there equal representation? We don't really know, but at least there's a decision.
There's a resolution.
There's a resolution,
yeah.
And everybody goes their separate ways. Now, I have a concern with a part of your a monologue that talked about calling on civil society to hold the government accountable, because in reality today, even those you are asking to hold the government accountable, they themselves are not accountable. Mm-hmm. So we can have this conversation both ways, but I think that it's important for those who come to equity, they must come with cleaners.
Nigeria ranks very low on the Global Rule of Law Index, largely due to the high time it takes for resolution, corruption, and processes that are considered slow, expensive, and biased to the powerful. So as far as these issues persist, people will always seek alternatives. Judicial turnaround time, it's not even just about the process, it's about the inefficiency of the entire judicial system and the inadequate capacity. In Lagos State alone, more than 30,000 cases are filed annually. Most of those cases would take more than 10 years to get resolved. So why will the average person want to wait that long for something that can be resolved in 30 minutes? That's, as Funke said, state failure. Because the government needs to do a whole lot more to rebuild trust and also to increase the turnaround time. The backlogs needs to be cleared. They need to recruit more judges, set up alternative resolution, have more mobile courts and all of that, just to speed up the process. And another reason that why people seek alternative judicial justice system is due to accessibility. People who live in communities where you can't even access the court. A law without swift consequences is a suggestion. I find weird.
Can we take advantage of our traditional institutions, for instance?
They used to.
Some of this?
They used to do. They used to.
One thing I can tell
But
you
it took
for
the
a fact
power.
is that people have lost trust in traditional institutions.
Precisely.
I can tell you that, and this is based on a study that we conducted some years ago for the Office of the Vice President. There are only probably at the time, this was 6 years ago now, that there were only 2 traditional rulers where about 80% of the population still trusted them completely. The Obong of Calabar and the Oba of Benin. All the rest, and this is across the country, people will always find, oh, he did this, he did that. There was always something.
What year did you do that?
6 years ago, 2019.
Oh, okay. Need to review now.
Definitely needs a review.
Need to review.
I'm not done this. I would also like to say another barrier to seeking the formal justice system is access to legal aid. It is expensive.
It is.
These other courts are not. You just go and...
That's a point.
Independent body, traditional rulers, whatever you choose to call it, civil society, if they're all still coming to this correct Nigeria that we have and the systems that we have, corruption will still find a way to creep into it. And I like that you mentioned the power of consequences again from what we even talked about last week. We need to rejig the whole system. There has to be consequences for action. You talked about delay being denial of justice. I absolutely agree, but bringing it back into even the system that we have, before you say you are employing more judges, having more people take up this role, right? What is even the accountability in the already, you said crisis is severe, right? What is the accountability in it? So you've seen cases where there are judgment rulings and it's not being followed. So what's the follow through in terms of even contempt of court? So what is the point if there is no accountability from the parts that he's talked about and what I'm saying now in terms of even follow through when the case is finally, when you say there's already a resolution and we don't even follow through. So the problem is, I like to use the word multifaceted, right? It's a lot. And we have to start from somewhere. And that somewhere would also mean that whoever wants to take up corruption as a what's the word now, agenda for their ruling or leading Nigeria has to be serious about it. It can't be lip service. It has to be across board and there has to be consequences for action. That's what I think.
Well, thanks everybody for listen. In the vein of both Funke and Yinka in calling out somebody, I probably would want to dwell on the former president of the Court of Appeal. I think that's a big enough fish. Remember, her husband said on the floor of the Senate that he used to help her with her judgments. At the very least, I'm not saying that she's guilty. That needs to be determined. But at the very least, a review of her judgments, which has not happened since that statement was made on June 12, 2023. For every crisis, there's a roadmap to recovery. The question would be this: do we have the will to embark on this journey?
It is said that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. This might just be the time to celebrate one of those positive milestones along the way. In a season in which 2 state houses of assembly, Rivers and Lagos, have been embroiled in internal wranglings, which have disrupted the business of governance, Bauchi State House of Assembly has gladdened the hearts of many in the Nigerian menstrual health space. The House of Assembly has passed its recent bill to provide free sanitary pads in primary, secondary, and community schools across the state. I am particularly delighted because Bauchi is one of the 13 states where my PAD scholarship for schoolgirls extended to. Now, Jennifer Weiss-Wolf said, and I quote, "Menstruation is not a single axis issue that affects a small number of people. It is an issue that impacts approximately half of the population of the world in numerous ways for a large portion of their lives." The menstrual advocacy movement is a worldwide effort. There are specific menstrual reforms in other countries. For instance, India eliminated the menstruation-based ban on girls and women ages 10 to 50 from visiting the Lord Ayyappa temple. It also classified menstrual products as tax exempt. In Kenya developed a program to distribute menstrual products to all students. Australia eliminated the tampon tax. New Zealand developed a program to provide free menstrual products in schools. And the watershed in 2020, Scotland passed the Period Products Free Provision Scotland Bill, the law that requires local authorities to ensure that period products are obtainable free of charge by all in need. Now, Bauchi State has put Nigeria on the global map of menstrual reforms by being the first state to pass such a legislation. It is particularly significant because the Speaker of the Bauchi State House of Assembly, Right Honorable Dr. Abubakar Suleiman, is the chairman conference of the speakers of the state legislatures of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It's very significant. Now, here are 3 critical reasons why the bill presented by his deputy, Honorable Danlami Kawule, resonate with me as a menstrual health campaigner. The first one, reducing absenteeism among schoolgirls. Secondly, addressing menstrual hygiene management by improving hygiene for indigent adolescent girls and women. And the third one is inclusion of often neglected females in correctional centers. So now we await an assent by the state governor, Bala Mohammed.
Wow, I love this for the women of Bauchi. For the first time ever in Nigeria, the legislatures are standing up for something that will significantly impact the lives of the women in the state. A lot of people underestimate the impacts of period poverty. In a country where the minimum wage is 70,000, and prior to that it was like half of that. And you're spending between 2 to 4% of your wage on menstrual hygiene products. Now imagine a family with 3-4 female children. You can see how
the PAD budget.
And then a research conducted by the Federal Ministry of Education says that 4 out of 10 girls miss at least 1 day of school in their menstrual cycle due to period poverty.
That's right.
So what this means for the women of Bauchi is that means their girls are able to stay more in school. They are able to participate in more activities and also improve academic performance all around. Congratulations to the women of Bauchi.
I mean, building up on what Zuma said, congratulations to the women of Bauchi in advance. But me being the cynical me, enforcement will Bauchi have the capacity to enforce when it goes into law? And also advocacy, because there will be significant cultural issues in terms of passing this into law. But some statistics or a stat that I would like to put up, because my organization did some research some time ago, and sanitary pads went up by 144% in cost in the year 2024, from January to December.
I have a story.
So it is actually something that should be across the country, because for us, it's a matter of economic survival. Women are approximately half of our workforce. So in terms of education, period poverty increases absenteeism and dropout rates. We can't afford it. Secondly, productivity. Again, because of period poverty, a significant, I think it's 8%, but I'm not too sure, a significant amount of Nigeria's workforce is not as productive as it could be because of period poverty. That needs to be worked on, seriously. Of course, I'm not even going to talk about the health issues. You talked about health issues in your monologue. So the economic burden. given that the average Nigerian, according to the NBS, earns that our median wage is 111,730 naira per year, we need per year. We need multiple earning households. You can't leave the burden on just the man. But if there's period poverty, then half of that household is not earning as it should be.
Very excited about this one. Like you said, we're looking forward to the governor assenting on this one. And I like what you said about the economic impact on the state itself. Well, I want to believe that it can, because a lot of mismanagements happen. If you can just remove a bit from your mismanagement, even if it's 2%, and focus it here, it will happen, right? And this advocacy, I have to say kudos to you, Funke. I've known you on this for a very long time. I mean, I want to say I fell off because I used to do it. I think this was from 2012, 2013, 2014. It was a major part of my media engagement as well. And I know the depth of the issue on ground, from education to health. I mean, we talk about period poverty in terms of just being able to afford these things, right? However, we also forget that there is the fact that some women, myself inclusive, not even just the cost. You need a day or two off.
That's right.
To even survive, right? And sometimes I wonder, when we talk about absenteeism and we look at it only from the period poverty in terms of being able to have the hygiene product to move, I wonder if we also realize that some of these girls might be going through severe pain, right?
Period conditions.
Yeah. So how are we inclusive enough to help them to catch up on what they have lost without being stigmatized or being made to feel like they are not serious with their education, right? So when we talk about absenteeism, I like us to think about it from that perspective as well. But I am hoping that once the governor can do this, it can spread. Nigeria can be better. One of the things we used to say then, I hope that I see relevance now, is that when it comes to condom, you get it everywhere.
It's free.
It's free. You go to events, they give it to you like it is the food that you need to eat to survive, right? And that is an action that you have your human, what's it called, free will to decide to take before you need to use the condom, right? But this one, we don't have free will on it.
It's
whether
not a choice.
You agree or not, your period will come, right? So I think that the resources that have been pushed into spreading condom can be pushed into ensuring that women have the hygiene products that they need to really live a decent life when this thing happens. Because it's not if, it is when, because it happens. And this is every month. It's not, right. It happens this month, it doesn't come. It is a constant expense that comes with being a woman.
Women are not homogeneous. So you can't put all of them in a box. I saw a particular conversation on social media recently of somebody who said that he had, or she had a staff or something that was always taking time off when it comes to our menstrual flow. And the comments on that were,
disparaging.
Very disparaging.
Oh, there's not calculating 2 days times 12.
So, and people were saying all sorts of things. I don't want to go to it. It's like, what occurred to me is that women are not homogeneous. I mean, some women don't have problems with their flow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly.
But there are some that it's a real issue.
It is.
And I think this is where inclusion comes into conversation. Because when we talk inclusion, people don't talk inclusion, including sanitary pads and all that. That we must understand that if we really want an inclusive society that includes women, and it doesn't have to be only women in primary or secondary school, even in the corporate environment, we must accommodate, we must be ready and willing to accommodate the fact that sometimes we have to factor in menstrual health issues. And I agree with you. We all have to be responsible, people,
absolutely,
corporate individuals, private individuals, and ensure that we have, this free sanitary pad. And the last thing I want to say is the government should also think about extending tax exempt for sanitary pad producing
Spot
companies.
on,
I think that will also help to bring down
The price.
the price.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. What's most heartwarming for me is to see that correctional centers were also included in this provision, and the fact that there will be pad banks in schools in Bauchi State. And as we celebrate milestones, it paves the way for future celebrations.
Certainly. As the blessing goes, may celebrations never cease in our homes.
Amen.
Amen.
UN official Michael Fakhri recently revealed something shocking. Western powers never intended for the International Criminal Court, of course known as ICC, to hold them accountable. Instead, as European political leaders allegedly admitted, the ICC was designed to prosecute African leaders. This is hypocrisy and racism at its core. But the bigger problem, African leaders are too divided, corrupt, and short-sighted to see how they are being played. It's no longer news that Africa has the fastest growing working age population, a resource that should be fueling our economic revolution. Yet, the continent struggles. Instead of building Africa, talented young people, engineers, doctors, creative, they're all leaving to work in other countries. I do not blame them. Meanwhile, African leaders fight over power and wealth instead of uniting for real progress. The Jackpot wave sees Africa's brightest minds contributing to the prosperity of other nations while their home countries remain stagnant. Even within Africa, movement is a struggle. As an African, I need about 21 visas to travel across Africa, my own continent. Yet global leaders speak of Africa as the future. How can we talk about growth when we don't even make it easy for Africans to connect and build together? Without unity, good leadership, strategic governance, smart investments, and foresight, Africa will stay a labor force for the world, but never a decision maker. Some even call it modern slavery. Africa provides the talent, the energy, the ambition, but other nations benefit the most. The truth is, African leaders are oppressed because they allow it. Their greed and short-term thinking make it easy for Western powers to control them. As they amass wealth and power at the expense of their people, they fail to see that their own oppression mirrors the oppression they inflict on their citizens. The late Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana once said, "We must unite now or perish." Africa has the potential to lead, but without unity and vision, it will stay stuck. The question is, will African leaders finally wake up?
African leaders are too divided, corrupt and short-sighted to see how they're being played. That's the number one quote that jumped at me here. The second one is, the truth is African leaders are oppressed because they allow it. Their greed and short-term thinking make it easy for Western powers to control them. I mean, you're hitting the right spots in this monologue, Elsie. I don't know what Africa did to warrant this set of leaders.
I don't know.
Unfortunately, these leaders are from among us, the followers as well. From West Africa to East Africa to North Africa to Central Africa, where else? South Africa as well. We see our leaders not really having a particular vision. They have the African Union, but for years I've struggled with seeing what the African Union is actually doing year on year. I know there is the AFCTA, but then tell me, make it trickle down to the people. What is it really about? Because it's all paper and high-sounding words, and people just feeling good with grammar. You look at what you said again, that you need 21 visas to travel across Africa. I'm thinking of going to Sierra Leone, but even right now, I'm already tired in my head about how I'm going to get to Sierra Leone, because then it means that you're going to go from one country to another, wait for hours to connect flights to another place. There's no straight from Nigeria to Sierra Leone. Forget it. There's no straight flight. There's no direct flight. So for how long are we going to continue like this in West Africa? Are we really together? Are we really cohesive? What country jumps out as the ideal country, that country that is on the pedestal in West Africa? None.
Our issue with Africa is very, very sad, because it's an issue that's 500 years in the making. For a start, we don't trust each other. So let me throw out something here. During the transatlantic slave trade, which lasted for 430 years, a full 30% of the people who ended up in the Americas were kidnapped by someone that they knew. Nobody ever seems to ask what's the effect on that was on the people who did the kidnapping. Not just the people who were kidnapped, but the people who did the kidnapping. It means that trust. So one of the fundamental problems that we have in this neck of the woods is that we are a low trust society. And everything builds on that. We don't trust ourselves. Then we now had 1884. 1884, the Berlin Conference put a further dagger into our being, because it brought in different peoples who probably did not have any business being together into contraptions called countries. And then the colonial masters, rather than build nations, spent time knocking our heads together.
Divide and
For
rule.
example, on social media, we see a lot of fights right now between Igbo and Yoruba people. There's no recorded history of any Igbo versus Yoruba antipathy prior to the 1910 Eleko riots in Lagos. 1910. That's when we first started having issues, or had an issue, because different peoples with different histories and different worldviews were brought together. And what we have is different, quote and unquote, tribal leaders who spent time continuing the divide and rule policies of the colonial times. I am not blaming colonialism. It is past time for our leaders to have begun, but what we're watching within many African countries is nation formation slowly. So for example, in Nigeria, the Isoko ethnic group is slowly disappearing, being replaced by something else. The Nigerian, Yoruba and Igbo people quarrel a lot, but within Nigeria, Yoruba and Igbo people intermarry a lot. Those children in 2 or 3 generations will be proper Nigerians, and then we will start having proper leadership.
One would say, are African leaders really oppressed because they allow it, or did they inherit a colonial system that prioritizes extraction over development and competition over cooperation? Because we need to be mindful of where it is we're coming from for us to know where it is we'll go. So for us to move past this, there has to be a lot of unlearning and relearning, which is what our leaders, they've refused to do.
Okay.
The topic it's very important, and I like the way you ended it with the quote from Kwame Nkrumah. We must unite now or we perish. And it takes me back to African Renaissance, where you ask yourself, is there a conspiracy of the global south, of the west, to keep Africa where it is? Because when you look at our leaders of thought, and then you ask yourself, we're talking about the generation of the Nkrumahs, the Obafemi Awolowos, the Nnamdi Azikiwes, and then you ask yourself, what happened to these leaders? A lot of them were assassinated. We talk about the Thomas Sankaras, the Patrice Mulumbas. And you ask yourself, is there a conspiracy to keep Africa where it is? So that it doesn't develop, it's just a place where they harvest raw materials and resources
Extract.
to feed the West. And then when you think about what is happening in the ICC, where I was going through the list of all the people that have been arrested and indicted, DRC, Uganda, Sudan, Central African Republic, Kenya, Libya,
African countries,
Cote d'Ivoire,
African leaders,
Mali, and then you then have a mix of Georgia, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Palestine, Philippines, Venezuela.
Third world.
There's nothing about the US or the UK or some of all these other countries.
Does it mean they're perfect?
You get the idea from the reaction that is obviously clear. The ICC is not designed for the West. is designed to keep you guys where you need to be. And so when you marry everything together, you ask yourself the question, what's the plan? And ultimately, I think that Africa has to wake up. And I think one of the first things they have to do is that they have to get out of ICC themselves and say, we're not signatories. If you cannot indict an Israeli or an African or an American,
then there's no
better
point.
not
There's no point.
indict anybody from Africa.
Yeah. Okay, well, that brings us to the end. You're probably thinking it's over before it's even begun. Well, there's plenty more where it came from. Join us again, same time, next week, same channel, and let's keep pushing and engaging for a better society. Till then, it's goodbye from all of us.
What about
Bye.